What's up? It's Chris Nunn with Seven Sounds Productions. I'll be doing a video series called Mixing 101, and I'll be going over pretty much my workflow, a little template that I use loosely. Spent a lot of time getting it right for this one. I notice I don't do the same exact thing every time, so but it should give you a good idea of kind of the workflow I work with, and hopefully give you some inspiration or some tools you can use for yourself. So after that, we'll be going over balance, and we're talking about volume, pan, EQ, compression, reverb, delay, effects with that and whatnot. And then we'll talk a little bit about arrangement and how that kind of plays into mixing, and especially as a producer, multi-hat. If you wear multiple hats, sometimes you're the artist, producer, and engineer, and mixer, and sometimes even a master. So all those things kind of play good. And then we'll also talk about grouping effects, groups, and then effects, using effects and EQ in groups, and balancing using the groups. And then we'll talk about stems and prints, or the final master mix, or don't want to use master, but the final mix prior to things getting mastered. And I'll talk a little about summing, which also ties into groups, and leveling with that, and different stems and stuff like that you can make. So these are different ways people, clients, or your friends, or different ways you yourself may want to store your mixes in ways that you can have some permanence in it, but also, I don't know if that's a word, but where you can still mix certain parts without having to go back and do the whole mix again. So in this video, we'll talk about my workflow and my loose template that I use. So I work in Cubase, but most digital audio workstations, or DAWs, you should be able to do this kind of stuff in. So here's Cubase. I use Cubase mainly, primarily, but also work with Pro Tools and Logic and Ableton and stuff like that. So here we are. Here's my mix window, mix console, and you'll see I have pretty much everything zeroed out except for these are my vocals. But normally when I make a beat and I do the kick and I go all the way down the line, sometimes I'll deviate from that, but that plays very important into mixing, because my mixing layout is pretty much the same every time. So I have my drums, kicks, snare, percussions, guitar, strings, keys, and then vocals, and then stuff like that. So when I get to this later on in a later video, this comes to some mixing, which I have everything going out of Cubase into a digital analog summing box called the D box, and then it goes back into my DAW, and I'll print that as my final mix prior to mastering. So like I said, if you're a producer or a beat maker or someone that records your own music, you'll probably end up kind of mixing as you go along, because you'll hear stuff. I do that a lot. You'll see my VST plugin effects plugins are grayed out. I got them all turned off for the most part. I do this because that's kind of like seasoning after you've already kind of cooked your meal per se. So we'll start with the cooking, the bare bones of what you need to do first, at least that I think you should do first as far as mixing goes. So one, you have your leveling. So the first thing so with my leveling and my workflow, as far as my workflow goes and my template, we have these VCA faders, and what those do is that they allow me to, once I get my levels kind of set, so say I had and I can kind of set my levels and whatnot. I need to undo that, but we'll do that. And then once you have that set, instead of playing with this all the time, if you want the overall thing, the overall section or group louder, this allows you to control them all at once. And then once you have that set and you start doing more of a macro mix, that's when I start using the group, because then I'm no longer playing with this. I'm playing with the group, and you can kind of control that. But okay, so each section has that. So my individual channels, my VCA, and then my group, and then each section has that. And then finally my group is tied to all music, this. So this, if I want all the music all at once and I don't want to mess with the different levels at all, I just boom, I can hear the vocals. Or yeah, so that's one way to do it. I'm not sure if the mute works. Yeah, the mute, if I want to mute them. So there's different ways you can do it. If you want to hear it lower or whatnot. Say you're working on your vocals and you want to hear a little bit of the music, then this is a good tool. If you want to just take it out, then at least you have one button to do that. Or if you want to solo it, yeah, you'll have to go to each group and do that. But anyways, as you mix, it keeps you from messing things up. So that way you'll have less buttons and faders to play around with as you get to the final steps of your mix, because you don't want to be like, having to redo stuff all the time, especially once you realize you just messed your mix up because you were just trying to look at one little thing somewhere else, and something in your overall mix or in your individual channels was kind of masking it, or you might want that. You want to fix a masking problem, and you can identify it that way. But if you're just trying to isolate a certain sound and say that sound is masking or just distracting you, that's probably a better term to use, is distracting. You can take that out without ruining your balancing job, because that's step one, is balancing. So that's my workflow. And then the next video we'll talk about balancing. All right.